Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast, brought to you by BuckeyeHuddle.com. I am Mark Givler. Got Kevin Noon with me here today. Some interesting things to talk about. This is going to be kind of a different episode just because we don't talk about special teams a lot, but we're going to talk about special teams here a little bit. We don't really do that with a lot of with the recruiting podcast, at least, but there's been some interesting news there we're going to get to. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of the early spring visits and kind of how Ohio State is putting these all together, and just some guys of note locally who we're going to see on campus here, or that we have seen on campus. So that's kind of going to be the theme today. I was also in Miami for the Under Armour camp on Sunday, so we'll dive in. I'll dive into that a little bit as well. It's we'll talk about a couple guys that Kevin has seen in the past as well, who I was able to watch again on Sunday. So that's going to be kind of our rundown today. Kevin, 6'7", 255-pound punter, Nick McLarty, 20 years old, from Australia, essentially a class of 2024 prospect. Let's just start with like the first impressions, because I think we were both like, well, who's this like offensive tackle we've never heard of that Mark Pantoni is ushering around practice on Tuesday? And like he's mammoth. He's bigger than Edric Houston. I mean, he is an enormous human being. I would have bet every possession I own he wasn't a kicker. If you would have told me that he's a kicker, is he a kicker or not a kicker for your life, for everything you own, I would have said clearly not a kicker. But he is. He's a punter. What was your thought, I guess, first seeing him and then finding out that's a punter?
Yeah, I saw him right at the beginning of practice, and I would have said lineman. I would have never said kicker. I would have never said 20. I would have never said Australian. He didn't have a wallaby following him around or anything. Didn't hear him speak, but I just assumed that he was an in-state lineman who was checking things out, and just kind of went on. And he kept going up and down the same sideline I was on. I'm like, I got to remember this kid's name. And I'm the first to admit I don't know every prospect in Central Ohio and on the board, but I generally retain most of them. And I had no idea who this kid was. And I just couldn't remember his name for the life of me. And then you mentioned, oh yeah, 20 years old, 6'7" punter. I'm like, sure about that? But yeah, he is a big kid, and I still haven't gotten around to see if he has any Pro Kick Australia footage or whatever, because I just still can't get past the fact that he actually is a punter and not a lineman or not a power forward or whatever.
Yeah, he has a couple of clips on Twitter of him punting from different angles and like different punt styles, like line drive punts, high, hang time, different things like that. It's crazy. Like he really looked like either like a lean offensive tackle or some like massive like defensive end, but just he's every bit of 6'7", 255. And he will be enrolling somewhere this summer. So he will be on a college campus this summer. He will probably be making at least one or two more Big Ten area visits, he told me. I think he kind of wanted to keep it under wraps a little bit, so we kind of have to play some little bit of guesswork on where he might pop up the next week or so. But it'll be in the Big Ten area somewhere. I guess we've kind of overlooked this. They only have two punters on the roster. Neither of them are scholarship guys. One of them's a transfer from Wayne State. And then you got like Joe McGuire, who's Australian as well. So I guess this makes sense, right? That they would pursue this?
I think they would pursue it, and I think it shows a situation of where, I mean, is whoever your winner, do you sit there and try and find him a scholarship? I know the line has been blurred so much between what a scholarship player and what a walk-on is these days. I mean, you can have training table, you can have all this stuff. I mean, we're not that far removed to where walk-ons were extremely limited in what type of benefits they could have and things of that nature. What is the Australian NIL policy for all of that? I don't know, but Ohio State certainly has a need. And yes, Ohio State did go into Wayne State and picked up a punter via the portal that way. But with where special teams were in terms of just a whole overview of the grouping last year, something that you can't look past. And no matter how successful you think the Ohio State offense is going to be this year, there are going to be those moments you have to punt. So Ohio State's certainly doing its due diligence here, and we don't know necessarily where else this player is looking. I guess we could go and look at other depth charts and see who probably has more of an immediate need, this year, next year for a punter, and kind of backwards engineer it. But I think if Ohio State pursues, I like Ohio State certainly, based on some of the comments that you've posted, I like Ohio State having an opportunity to make this one happen, as everybody is so concerned about Ohio State going into the offensive line room and getting a portal transfer there. Well, they're just going to get a punter the size of a small offensive lineman.
Yeah, I should have asked him how his pass sets are, see if he can pass protect. So he's still on campus, or he's still around. It's an unofficial visit. It's not an official. It's an unofficial visit. But it's a multi-day visit. He's going to be back at practice here tomorrow, Thursday. He's expected back at practice before he heads elsewhere. Does not yet, or has not yet, reported a scholarship offer. So we don't fully know what Ohio State's thought process is here yet. If this is kind of like a walk-on opportunity, preferred walk-on opportunity, or if on Thursday they give him an offer on the way out the door. I'm not quite sure how that's going to play out. Again, they don't have a scholarship punter right now. So I think if they offer him, that would be extremely telling on how they would view his ability to come in right away and be their punter in 2024. Or if this is more of going to be of a preferred walk-on opportunity where they want him to come in and join an open competition. And then, like you said, Kevin, maybe the winner of whatever competition they have throughout the summer and some fall camp can find their way on scholarship. That's usually able to happen. You usually, because you have to get down to 85, in the summer, you generally start, September 1, whenever you kick off the season, you generally kick off the season with 83, 84. You generally don't kick off the season with 85, because by the time you have to get down to 85, there's still that couple month window there before the season starts. And it's not uncommon to lose a guy or two in that time frame. So we will see what develops there, but it's interesting. He does have an offer from Utah. So I don't know. Again, we'll talk to him more. I talked to him a little bit on Tuesday evening. We'll talk to him more coming out of the visit once we know a little bit more about where Ohio State sees this going as far as offer or no offer and all that good stuff. But but I'm not sure kind of what his mindset is on, hey, you're going to have to offer me a full scholarship. I've got a scholarship to Utah, which is a good program. I'm not coming to your place for free, or, I'm not coming to your place and paying my way. So that's a conversation we may need to have with Nick when we catch up with him after the visit, but we'll kind of see how this plays out. But just kind of a fascinating story. We've seen some big burly kickers, Sebastian Janikowski and guys like that, but this guy's 6'7", 255. He is, and he's shredded. He looks like a defensive end, really, like a big, tall defensive end. I have never in my life seen a punter that looks like him.
Yeah, you have to wonder, how fast is he? Is he going to be able to get there? And as long as Ohio State can stay on side and have the right number of players on the field, can he run your fake? Because I'll tell you this, a lot of corners aren't going to be able to bring him down, I don't think. Or they're going to go low, and if he's got, any sort of agility, he's going to be able to defeat that and get by and pick up some yardage if he's got any sort of wheels. But I've never seen anybody quite like this in terms of build. Again, as I had said a couple minutes ago, I'm a little behind the 8 ball in terms of I haven't watched the footage, but I can watch somebody put up stuff on YouTube or whatever of them just
pretty good.
yeah. But I mean, let me see when you're under fire and everything else. And with somebody coming over from Australia, where whether or not he's been playing Australian rules football or rugby or whatever down there, not exactly apples to apples to American football.
Yeah, I would be fascinated to watch him like go through like a combine workout, like pro shuttle 40. Like I'd be fascinated to see what kind of athleticism he has, because that opens up all. If he's a good athlete, that opens up all sorts of possibilities on the fake punts, even the ones that aren't called apparently. Or is that too soon? Is that too soon? It's a little bit too soon to start talking about the fake punts that were and weren't called. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see kind of how this progresses. I'm really captivated by this one. I know the people on Twitter were too. I got a lot of comments when I threw out the tweet that Ohio was hosting a 6'7", 255-pound punter, and people on Twitter were like, "We gotta have him. I don't care. We don't care if he can punt. We gotta have a 6'7", 255-pound punter." So we'll see. We'll follow up on this here again in the next day or so, and make sure we get an update on the site on where things are at with Nick. But Nick wasn't the only guy on campus Tuesday. A lot of what Ohio State's going to do here this first week before they go on spring break is it's going to be a lot of Ohio guys. The big name, like out-of-state guys, those will come after spring break. So we're talking like March 22nd through the end of March. And then, of course, spring game weekend in the middle of April. But this first week, because there's only like 2 practices and they're off to spring break. And it's kind of a weird setup where you get going and then you immediately, take a week off, but just how they've always done it really the last several years. So again, a lot of that's going to be in-state guys, but there's some interesting guys on campus Tuesday. So we'll run through a few of them. Start with Dwayne Galloway, I guess. Columbus Marion Franklin High School, 4-star corner. There's been a lot of talk about him over the last year. I mean, there's a lot of intrigue because he is a highly rated player right in Ohio State's backyard, doesn't have an offer, has some big national offers. So there's like an ongoing debate, I think, amongst the fans, especially like what Ohio State should be doing here. Obviously, there was some talk that, the relationship there wasn't that great. I don't think I buy that. I think Ohio State has been in communication with Dwayne and kind of keeping up there just to kind of see how things go. But, he showed up. He's been talking about camping at Ohio State in June. Ohio State, I think, has mentioned to him in the past, like, you're going to have to camp. It sounds like he's going to do that. I just don't know. They have 3 corners committed already. You're recruiting Dorian Brew, I think, kind of telling him he's a corner right now. It could end up at safety, but I think you're going to start him at corner at least and see how that goes. And Dorian Brew's got the offer right now. So there's a lot of obstacles here, in my opinion, for this to come together. But it was interesting to note that he showed up for his visit. And he is kind of talking about camping in June.
Yeah, we talk about recently over the last couple of years, it's not the time to be an in-state wide receiver that is not a top 20 national type of kid because of just what Ohio State's recruiting has been. Well, this year is not the year to be a corner either because, as you said, they have 3 corners in the class, and they certainly could add a 4th who could be kind of a swing, whether or not he's a corner or a safety. And I know it drives Ohio State fans crazy when they see highly rated Ohioans who go unoffered or go under recruited or whatever by Ohio State, and the risk of having to face them potentially if they stay in the Big Ten. Well, for Galloway, he's kind of a national kid already at this point. If you look at his offer list, and very well could leave the state if it's not Ohio State, but his willingness to at least to consider to camp. I mean, it shows something there. I mean, he's somebody that, as long as he's not looking to rush things along, as long as he's like, I want to be committed by May, come hell or high water, to a school, and that's where I'm going to ride. You know, if he's willing to take this, and you just kind of see where things go, because things change one way or another. And I mean, he's certainly a really talented kid. I mean, there's a lot about his game that I like, but this is just not the year to be a corner. That and I mean, you look at, you know, if you look at Blake Woodby and you're like, he is the lowest rated corner in Ohio State's class, and Blake Woodby is a tremendous player. And that's just how good Devin Sanchez is. That's just how good Naeem Offord is. And it just, you know, it's just the reality.
Yeah, so we'll continue to monitor that throughout the next several months. I don't suspect they're going to offer here in the short term. I suspect that, you know, camp is going to be an important component to this. Dorian Brew's decision is going to be an important component to this. Their ability to keep the vultures away from Naeem Offord is going to be an important component to this. So there's a lot to go. There's a long way to go here, I think, before we need to start talking about this as a possibility for him ending up in the class. But it's noteworthy. It's noteworthy that he's visiting. He's kind of, you know, they're staying in touch, and he is going to. He's saying he's going to camp right now, which is obviously we won't know that for 3 months. But so we'll keep an eye on that one. Another local guy to keep an eye on, and this is another immediate. This is a 2025 kid. Is Cal Thrush. He's a defensive end from Upper Arlington, really good player, productive guy. I think, again, we just talked about Dwayne, you know, is this the wrong year to be a corner? I think if Cal Thrush was in the last 2 or 3 recruiting classes, he may have found his way more into the mix, more into the discussion than he has so far to this point. But, you know, they continue to bring him into campus. They clearly like him. He's visited several times. I mean, they clearly think he's a good player. But London Merritt, you know, we got Zahir Mathis, but London Merritt, Marion Dye, Justin Hill, Damian Shanklin's going to be on campus soon. You assume that offer's coming. That's just another one where really good player. Is it just bad timing?
Yeah, it all is part of the equation. And there are plenty of times where I see a player who goes unoffered by Ohio State, and I'm like, if you rewound 1 year, that kid not only would have been offered, but probably would have been one of the better players in the class. And it's just it is what it is. I mean, I think that I could say the same thing too about running back and like Kentrell Reinhardt. And it's just very difficult. And people, again, a lot of fans, and we have a lot of fans of our podcast here at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle, who mention a lot of in-state kids. I really wish they would offer this kid. I really wish they would offer that kid. And how you maintain the line between your in-state recruiting and your national picture recruiting and everything else is very difficult. But, you know, this Ohio State class could end up being a really deep national type of class. And it's just, there's just not enough spots. I mean, let's get to the expansion of college football of where we're probably going and get up to 100 scholarships, because just with the length of the season of what it's going to be and just how the game's getting more physical, I think, you know, Ohio State certainly wouldn't hurt from an expansion in scholarships, but I'm probably getting ahead of myself there.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. I like this 2025 class in Ohio quite a bit. I think 26 is even better, but I think 25 is really good. And now in 26 obviously takes a little bit of a hit now, technically, because Chris Henry Jr. is going to be thrown in with the California guys now. But you know, 2025 is really strong. I was asked in our chat yesterday, like, how many Ohio kids and like which Ohio kids could be in the class. And like, I got to 9, and that didn't count Dorian Brew, who's no longer, you know, technically an Ohio kid. So, you know, if you want to count him in, I think Texas obviously is making a big push there. Obviously, so is Oregon. But, you know, Dorian Brew would actually not count in that 9. And then you assume somebody is going to work their way in at camp, because the only guy I had in, I think that was like unoffered right now. I think I only had one. It was Nolan Davenport, the offensive tackle from Massillon. who is actually visiting tomorrow, Thursday. So I didn't go out and like predict 3 or 4 new offers in state, but at least like one guy is going to get something at some point. So this is a class that, could have 11, 12 Ohio natives in it. And you're still talking about 4 or 5 guys. It's like, if they just don't have room at this position right now. So it's a deep class in Ohio. I think it's one of the deeper classes we've had recently. I think if you're Ryan Day, you're really happy with it. You have this kind of group. And by the way, my 9 only counted 1 Ohio running back. They've offered 2. So, I mean, there are endless ways this could end up being like 12 Ohio natives in this class, which would be, even though we think this is going to be a really big class, that would still be like way more than we've seen them take in recent years. I mean, there's been years they've been like 5.
Right.
And, a lot of years it's like 8. But so this could get to close to a dozen Ohio natives. So
we also look at if Ohio State has a successful season. I mean, first of all, just point blank, that you had a lot of guys who made a decision to come back in 24 who will be out of eligibility or really could have been in the draft this year, who are coming back to quote unquote run it back one more time. So 25, this old number of 25 in a class, throw that away because that doesn't exist anymore. It's all about 85. It's going to probably be a big class, as Mark just said right there. And let's just say that they get to 28. If you get to 12 of 28, we're getting back into Tressel years. And we were talking about back in the Tressel years, we hadn't seen some of the population shifts, or they were just starting, and Ohio was just a lot deeper. And then Urban Meyer comes in and opens up a more national recruiting. His strategy was very different than Jim Tressel's, and there was a lot of pushback from people, and there were some hurt feelings amongst, the Ohio high school community that Ohio State recruiting kind of got away from the in-state. But 25 and certainly 26 as well are both shaping up for Ohio State to be able to produce a lot of talent in state. And that's important too, because we've seen what happens when you have to go to South Florida for a running back and you have to hang on for dear life against Miami, and Ohio State has not been able to hang on in the last 2 years in those types of situations. It's a lot easier to hang on to an in-state kid than it is an out-of-state kid, especially somebody hundreds and hundreds of miles away. So, we talk every year, and I do end up doing a podcast in April of every year about how this is going to be the greatest statistical Ohio State recruiting class ever. And that's all well and good until we get to about August, and then it seems like that brick wall is hit. But when you have a lot of in-state guys, I think Ohio State is in really good shape this year. And if it's able to put together on the field the results that we're expecting, it's not going to hurt. Maybe some of offensive line, defensive line recruiting are still going to be brought into question for good reasons and for different reasons, but good reasons. But this in-state recruiting is kind of nuts, and it'll be interesting to see what the deck looks like for the class of 26. Yeah,
they're already starting. They've already offered 3 offensive linemen in Ohio in 26, so that 26 will be a fun one to cover as well. I'm going to transition here to the Miami camp in a second. I just want to mention one other prospect that was on campus Tuesday, and that's one more local guy. That was Caden Gebhardt. He's a 2026 safety out of Olentangy. Tremendous player. I saw him twice this year, but the game against Springfield in the playoffs, he was special. He had a billion tackles in that game. He can get downhill. He's got great size. He can get downhill. He can run. He's smart. He takes great angles. It would not shock me to see Caden Gebhardt get an Ohio State offer at some point. And maybe this summer will be a key moment for that. I'm sure he's going to camp this summer. But that's a guy to kind of keep on your radar in 2026 for sure. But let's move to Miami camp. You mentioned kind of the running back recruiting there just a minute ago and kind of how crazy that's been. Well, they're still at it with Byron Lewis, American Heritage, 4-star prospect. Byron's great interview with Byron. You can find that on either BuckeyeHuddle.com, or you can watch the full video on YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. But he's always one of my favorites to interview. He has fun with it. And I think I enjoy the cat and mouse game with him of trying to extract information. And he enjoys, I think, trying to not get it extracted. So it's always fun. But he did mention, he says that Ohio State's still one of my top schools. Tony Alford's one of my favorite coaches. And mentioned, he's coming up for the Michigan game in the fall. He wants to see that. He may visit in the summer and the spring, but, probably at least once between now and then. Jordan Davison's coming in at the end of the month from Mater Dei, California star. And you've offered 2 Ohio running backs. So no one's going to come out of this happy as far as like the Ohio State fans are concerned. No one's coming out of this happy. If they take the 2 Ohio kids and they walk away from a Byron Lewis or especially a Jordan Davison, I can already see that kind of meltdown happening. If they let one or both of the Ohio guys go elsewhere, and let's say they can get Jordan Davison early and then they chase Byron Lewis, and I can just see that, you're doing this again in South Florida and you got these kids in Ohio. Like, no one is coming out of this happy. But I think the big domino is Jordan Davison here at the end of the month. That's a 4-day visit. It's his second prolonged visit to Ohio State in the past 10 months. Plus he's been to a game. That to me is the big domino here. And once that visit's over and Ohio State's got a feel for, we lead, we're getting him soon, we're not getting him, we don't lead. Once Ohio State kind of comes out of that with their idea of where that picture is, I think at that point we will finally see some movement. Like Bo Jackson's coming in on the 30th too of March. So which is going to I think overlap with Davidson for a day or two. This is going to be nuts. And I think people who are confident in how this is going to play out are being a little dishonest. I don't even think Ohio State knows how this is all going to figure itself out yet.
Yeah, I have no idea with the running backs. I don't pretend to say, I don't say that I know anything that's going to happen there. And you're right, nobody is going to be happy. But we were in a situation of where even fewer people were going to be happy last year when Jaquan Lyle was committed before he flips to Miami. And, there was talk that Ohio State was only going to take 1 back this year, which I wasn't buying for a second. But if you're sitting there and you have 4 backs that are more than capable, national type of players, and you're only taking 1 of them, Lord, that would have been a mess. But I think that Jordan Davison is the linchpin. I think that one is really important because you'll know where you stand, or you hope you'll know where you stand. I mean, yes, in a perfect world, Ohio State just gets that commitment, and then you hold on for dear life, and you have Chris Henry Jr. move in with him and not let him answer his phone for anybody else. But beside that, as the dog is barking, you just have to try and weather the storm and see what's happening. And is this going to be a case of 1 in-state, 1 out-of-state? Do you even have that type of strategy at this point? I mean, do you say to Bo Jackson and Marquise Davis, we'd like you both. The first one in is in, and the other one we'll keep in touch. I just don't know how you necessarily handle it. Fool me once, fool me twice, fool me thrice. I just I'm a little skittish on South Florida running backs right now, just because of how that works. People are going to be like, well, just have it to where these guys don't commit until the last second, so they don't flip. But I would rather have a commitment of a guy and play defense at that point rather than just kind of farting around in the wind and seeing what happens. But what a mess. I mean, but it's the soap opera that we're all here for. This is recruiting, and these are the good times. It's not a case of Ohio State cannot find a running back anywhere, anybody that is worthy of being part of the program. No, Ohio State absolutely can. It just has to figure out how to pare the numbers down.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have in a sense that they have a bunch of really good options right now. So it's a little bit of a headache trying to figure it out, I think, but it's not, you would much rather be in this situation than coming into this year with like needing 2 running backs and not having great options. I mean, that would obviously be a much worse spot to be in. Before Jordan Davison scheduled that long visit, I was kind of in the boat of take the 2 Ohio backs and then like recruit Jordan Davison and Byron Lewis and be like, hey, we'll have a spot for one of you. And you tell the Ohio kids, like, yeah, we'll take one of those 2 out-of-state kids. And if you don't want to be part of a 3-back class, you don't want to be part of a 3-back class. Like, I would actually try and make this a 3-back class if I could. I still think I would go with that strategy, but now that Jordan Davison has scheduled this 4-day visit, I do think it's prudent to at least, this has played out for a year now. What's another 3 weeks? Like, at least, like, let's let this Jordan Davison visit happen, and then let's formulate our plan based on how we feel that visit is going. But I would try, they took 3 they had 3 last year at one point. They would have taken 3 last year if they could have. I don't know why you wouldn't take 3 this year.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely would, because Trevion Henderson will be gone. Quinshon Judkins will be gone. Do you see if Dallin Hayden isn't utilized enough this year? I mean, does he just sit there and leave after this year? I mean, again, he's kind of waited his turn, and Ohio State, for whatever reason, hasn't utilized him enough. But, at that point, it's like, I can only fall for the banana in the tailpipe trick so many times before I learn. I certainly would go into it of saying 3 is very much on the table as long as it's the right 3. But the 4 backs we're talking about absolutely fit the bill.
And it may end up being a situation where you can't. It maybe end up being a situation where once you get the first 2, the other guys are like, nah, I'm good. I mean, so it may be a moot point. But even if no one transfers out after the year, like you just lose Judkins and Henderson to the NFL, 3 backs would put you at 6. Do you need 6 scholarship running backs? I would say ideally you probably don't. I would say probably 5 is the right number, but 4 is not the right number. Like you want 5, especially like the schedule's only getting longer. Like they keep adding games. It's 12 teams now. Now it's gonna be 14 teams. And before you know that, it's gonna be 16 teams. Like they keep adding games to the schedule. Like keeping a roster healthy, this is very much becoming an NFL schedule at this point. And if you watch the NFL, if you have a favorite NFL team, throughout the year, you cannot really count on your starter to play all 17 games. You essentially know throughout the year, your starter's probably going to get 2 or 3 games where he doesn't play. If you're lucky, if he doesn't get like seriously injured. And you see like the NFL, all these teams have like 3 running back rotations. And then if someone gets hurt, obviously you get down to your 4th. You can get down to your 4th very quickly, but your top 3 are going to play, and they're all going to play quite a bit. And that's kind of where this is going in college. So I'd do a little bit of overkill here if I could. But again, let's let the Davison visit play out. See what happens there. See what the buzz is there. What Ohio, like, again, I've got Jordan Davison in the class. Like he's in my mock class right now. I think they're getting him. I've said that since last June. I've said they lead. I do think Texas is a very real threat, but I think this is Ohio State and Texas right now. I really do. And I think Ohio State has a great chance to land this kid. I think they're going to have a really good idea of what those chances are coming out of this next visit. So kind of go from there, but back to Byron Lewis. It's again, how long do you play that game versus, if you can get the Ohio kids. So that's going to be an ongoing thing that Ohio State has to deal with. But let's get into quickly here before we log off here. A couple receivers. There were a few receivers I was there to watch. We have the video up on 2 of them on BuckeyeHuddle.com/YouTube or YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Yeah. That doesn't help anybody. It's not going to drive any traffic. So let's get into that. Let's first talk about Javon Boggs, Ohio State commit, Cocoa, Florida, dominated the Under Armour camp on Sunday. Here he is, kind of going through the combine style NFL combine style drill. But had the absolute catch of the day in one-on-ones, which we will get to in a second. I can't remember where exactly it is in this video, but I will point it out when it's coming up. Just an absolute force. Went batted 1,000 in one-on-ones, caught all of his one-on-one passes, was not stopped in one-on-ones, continues to shoot up the rankings, has basically become a top 100 type of player according to the national rankings. Brian Hartline offered him early before most big schools. He was, basically offered him when he was a 3-star. So Buckeyes were not star chasing here. This is just a guy Brian Hartline really liked. And I loved what I saw out of him on Sunday with his ability to fight through, traffic there. Like, there's a couple where he takes contact and he's able to fight through that. And here comes the catch of the day right here. Just snatches it. It's just one hand, back shoulder, unbelievable grab, but just a dominant force on Sunday. And I know, Kevin, you saw him at camp this past summer when he got offered. It feels like I wouldn't compare him to Jackson Smith and Jigba in certain ways. There are differences about their game, but it's got that type of feel to it where it's like they identified him earlier than everybody else, and now everyone's like, oh shoot, we should have offered this kid. Let's try and get him.
Yeah. Can anybody say Mylan Graham in terms of that, where Ohio State got involved with Mylan Graham before anybody else did, and was able to hang tight there. And I think that going into this recruiting cycle before really any commits had happened and everything else, that we all had our list of who the best in state, in the state of Florida, that is, receivers were. And I don't know if Boggs was somebody that was going to be number one on anybody's list, but this kid is playing his way. I mean, okay, we're in the camp circuit right now. We're in the underwear Olympics, but what I'm seeing right now is a kid that very much needs to be in consideration for 5-star status by the time it's all said and done. And it just goes to show once again that Brian Hartline is not looking at a ranking service list and saying, okay, well, these are the 5 kids that I should be going after just based on their star ranking. He's going out. Hell, he may be setting what the recruiting services are doing. I would follow along and see who Brian Hartline offers, because obviously he's got the pedigree of who he's landed, the development while at Ohio State, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, Boggs is going to be one of these kids that I think is really going to stick in the craw of the big 3 down there, that they did not get involved earlier, and just seeing yet another top Floridian escape north to Ohio State.
And let's be clear here as we talk about his camp performance. He's not really a camp guy. He's not one of these like 6'3", 4'3", 4'4", 40-inch vertical. He's not. That's not his game. He is what I call, I've said this about him a few times now, he is the textbook definition of a gamer. There is nothing about him like athletically that is like off the charts as far as his height, his speed, his quickness. But he knows how to run routes. He knows how to position his body. He knows how to outwill defenders on 50-50 balls. He never drops a pass. It's scary that he was able to do this at a camp, because that's not his thing. That's not what he's supposed to be doing. He's Mr. Friday night. He's Mr. in pads, production. He's not the first guy you point out in the lines at these camps and say, oh, that's definitely the Ohio State receiver there. So the fact he was able to do that in a camp setting, which is not his best setting, I think speaks volumes about how good of a player he is and kind of where he's at. And I admitted on our site the other day, I said, look, I wasn't convinced that they were going to offer him, or even that they should have offered him at camp. He didn't run a particularly good 40. I was like, oh boy, did you need to do that then? But like everything he's done since then has proven that offer to be correct. I mean, it just been unbelievable junior season, and just 7-on-7s camps now. So again, when you watch this at camp and you kind of take this into your mental evaluation of Boggs, remember this is like his worst setting. Like it's like games, 7-on-7s, camps. Like if you're impressed with him at a camp, wait till you see him in other settings, because that's where he really shines.
And he's doing this at the Miami camp. He's not doing this at the Boise, Idaho camp. He's doing this at really what should be one of the strongest camps of the season out there, of your regional camps, and not your, not the opening or whatever. And for somebody who doesn't necessarily, that their game is not put into being a camp setting in terms of that, I'm not going to run that, that highly inflated hand time 4.31 40. I'm not going to go and do a 45-inch vertical jump or whatever, but he just goes out there and he makes plays. And we have seen those types of receivers come through and excel at Ohio State that just look kind of unassuming. And then, it's time to go and you foot meets leather and you hear the whistle. And before you know it, 11 receptions, 173 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, and so he's probably going to play in the slot. So I think that works because of his ability to kind of create separation. He kind of uses his body, uses leverage to create the separation. And he's very tough. He's very physical. He's very difficult to handle. And you saw just on that thing in a camp setting, there's like 2 routes where he didn't really separate a lot, but just enough. And then the ball goes in and he out muscles a defensive back to get the ball. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And so we'll see kind of how he progresses here, but he's doing a great job. And I think Ohio State fans should be pretty excited about this one. Another guy we have a little tape here of is Winston Watkins. And this one has been a roller coaster, folks. We remember 2 summers ago, he showed up at Ohio State. It was an early Texas A&M commitment. We kind of figured out he wasn't long for that. Did a great job at the Ohio State camp. They offered him. Decommits from Texas A&M, but commits to Colorado. And Coach Prime has since decommitted from Coach Prime, and now is telling me that Ohio State's right back in it. And he's talking to Hartline all the time. And Hartline's one of his favorite coaches, and he's going to be coming up probably in the spring and then probably later for an official. And so here we go with Winston Watkins, who I think rivals as a 5-star. He was tremendous on Sunday too. I mean, he's another guy who's probably a slot guy at the next level. Tremendous quickness, tremendous hands, tremendous, ability to kind of make that body adjustment, body control, make those tough catches. Again, he's a little more sudden than like Boggs in terms of like sticking his foot in the ground and going. But again, he can make contested catches here. I mean, look at this. I mean, he fights through contact and then he kind of goes up and outplays the defensive back for the ball. But again, another special talent, another great player that Ohio State's in on. And it's like, when is this, Hartline's almost entering the realm of having his own problems the way the running back room does. Like, when are you accepting commitments? Who are you accepting them from? Like, who are you going to have to turn away here?
I don't know. Because there are just in the state of Florida, there are other great receivers that we're not even necessarily talking about. Vernell Brown, he's an athlete. Is he a receiver? I think he's a receiver. Nashawn Montgomery down in South Florida. I mean, you've got all of these guys, and we haven't even necessarily, we haven't left the state of Florida. So I don't know, but every year we talk about, well, there's going to have to be a correction one year. There's going to be a year that Ohio State takes either fewer receivers or maybe doesn't get, 2 5s and 2 high 4s or whatever because of just the glut in the room. But you have to keep taking these guys, and you are going to keep taking these guys. Noah Rogers stayed at Ohio State for a year, and whether or not we want to sit there and say that Ohio State kind of botched its usage of Noah Rogers or not, I mean, that's a debate. I think that even if he would have played, he still would have been homesick. I think homesickness played a huge factor in there. The kid, very much a homebody in terms of, he's not a guy that wants to go out and do a lot of stuff. He just wants to kind of stay home. He's really close with his family. So I don't know when Ohio State slows down per se. And then, Ohio State already has a tremendous start in 26 with Chris Henry Jr. And with what Ohio State's done in its quarterback recruiting, and you sit there and you look and, if you're a receiver, you can talk about development and everything else. If you don't have a guy who can get you the ball, what the hell are we doing here? So everything is just ticking off right for Ohio State. So, again, I think we're looking at the potential of them putting together a class that could rival 24, and maybe there's not somebody who's just so head and shoulders above everybody else like a Jeremiah Smith, but damn, I mean, this could be this really. I mean, the collective of what Ohio State could have here is amazing, and it's going to be important for Chip Kelly and Brian Hartline for them to cycle through these players, because you can't just keep collecting chess pieces and being like, well, I'm saving them. You've got to play these guys. And when you don't have a Marvin Harrison Jr., and that's not taking anything away from Emeka Egbuka, but when you don't have a Marvin Harrison Jr. that you're pushing for a Heisman candidacy, that you're pushing for a Biletnikoff, maybe you can have a little bit more of a rotation. Maybe when you sit there and you have somebody who's more focused on just where the offense stands as opposed to managing the whole chessboard, like what you have to do as a head coach, they will be able to do a better job there. And I think that will help them maintain the momentum that they have in receiver recruiting nationally.
I mean, we've said it. So you got Boggs committed. You've got Winston Watkins. You've got Vernell Brown. You've got Nashawn Montgomery. You've got Jamie French. That's just Florida. And I think I've said this for a few months now. I think they're in great shape with Jamie French, which, wow, you get him. And now it's like, okay, how many of these guys can we actually take? I mean, Khalil Lockett's coming up from Texas. He's a stud. They're on the short list there. He was very excited to get that Ohio State offer this winter. And he's coming up. Like, there are other guys out there right now beyond Florida. So it's going to be interesting. But yeah, Winston Watkins, Ohio State, that's now a thing again. Am I predicting him to end up in the class? Not yet. The one thing he did tell me was he's going to wait until signing day in December because he's done with which is probably a very smart thing to do at this point for him. He's like, I am done with the committing and decommitting thing. Like, I'm just going to wait until December. So that's going to be a thing of, does Ohio State have room at that point? Will they hold a spot? Will they, so there's a lot of moving parts here with receiver recruiting. But again, it's a good problem to have when you're talking about trying to figure out space for 6 or 7 of the nation's top receivers and kind of figure out how to prioritize them and how many you're going to be able to get. So wide receiver recruiting still alive and well, coming out of that Miami camp. Nashawn Montgomery, again, I talked to him as well. He'll be visiting. We'll have some video up of him in the next day or so. He's expecting to come back for a visit in the spring as well. So Brian Hartline continuing to make life difficult for the other schools that like to recruit Florida. But everything's moving in the right direction right now for Ohio State recruiting. They've got a great 2025 class. They've got a great start in 26 with some key targets in Ohio coming up to visit here in the next few weeks. And we'll be covering all of it at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Dead period's over, so visitors are going to start, as we mentioned, this week. A lot of in-state guys, and then toward the middle end of the month, we're going to start seeing a lot of national, Florida, Texas, big-name kids from out of state rolling through Columbus. So keep it locked in at BuckeyeHuddle.com. It's a great time to join with spring ball kicking off. I know everyone's super excited about this team and what the expectations are and how the new guys look. We've got a lot of that stuff on our message board if you want to read all about that. But otherwise, I hope you're subscribed to our channel here at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. And if you're not, please do that. And if you can hit the like button, it also helps other Ohio State fans find this content. But we'll do another one of these here in the next few days, but appreciate everyone watching and listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.